join me as I deliver it to her?
No,
Okay.
as a matter of fact, no. But
Glad to hear you say that.
well, I am mobility impaired these days and I'm going to use it. So, um, wait a minute. So we'll call the meeting to order. And again, because of mobility impairedness, I will hold the flag and you guys can rise. And we'll say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag
of the United States of
States of
America
America,
and to the republic
Republic
for which it
stands,
stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty.
liberty and justice for all.
For all.
Okay. I hope I don't drop that. All right. Okay, that is much easier than it's been the last week. All right. All right, so Mr. Clerk,
I'll be
oh
happy.
no, pledged. So we don't, I skipped over the roll. We'll do that now.
I'll be delighted. Supervisor Alan Goldberg,
I'm here.
Trustee Gail Schnitzer Eisenberg,
here.
Trustee John T. Thomas,
Here.
Trustee Elliot Robbins,
Here.
Trustee Stephen Mosier,
Here.
Assessor Jan Churchwell,
She's muted.
Right. I'm here.
Director of
Hello.
Administration and Finance Ty,
She's also
I thought
on
I
mute.
saw her name before, but, all right,
and
She's on mute.
okay.
communication.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now you're here, kid.
We got
Okay.
Hi,
Okay.
Diane.
Hi there. Good evening.
and
Yes.
Deputy Sandy Forrester.
Here, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, boy, can we hear you?
Mr. Supervisor, we have a quorum for business.
Thank you. Are there any other participants who are in our presence who are attending the meeting? So we can make you part of our official record. Yes,
Hi, my name is Kate Casal McNally. I'm resident in Winnetka.
hi, welcome. Anyone else?
My name is Paul Lively. I'm chairman of the Agency Oversight Committee.
Welcome,
I'm Ed Allinger, Chair of the Mental Health Committee.
welcome,
And Jennifer Hull, Chair of Money Follows the Person Committee.
terrific, thank you.
Brian Leverins, staff.
Yeah, the guy who runs everything. All right, anyone else?
Hi, I'm Danielle Rubin, resident of Wilmette.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Nicole Cabrera, and I'm a resident of Wilmette.
All right.
There's two at the bottom, Alan.
I'm sorry?
There are two at the bottom who are not identified themselves.
I'm Mary Lawler, and I am a resident of Wilmette.
Welcome. Okay, well, the rules for public comment are very loose. It's on the agenda for 3 minutes or so at the beginning of the meeting, and any time as the flow of the meeting makes it appropriate to ask a question, and we'll try and deal with it when that comes up. So the meeting is in order, and I'll make our first call for public comments. Okay, hearing none, we'll move to approval of the minutes from our meeting of December 17th of last year.
I move we approve the meeting minutes from December 8th as written.
Thank you.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those meetings are approved. Thank you.
Jerome, are we doing roll call votes again?
Oh, thank you. Mr. Clerk,
Supervisor Goldberg,
I am here.
Trustee Eisenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Thomas,
Yep.
Trustee Mosier,
Yes.
and Trustee Robbins.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, the minutes are approved. So we now move to committee funding presentations. And before we get into that, you guys are owed a terrific thanks by the board and anybody else who cares. Because without the work you do in screening and going over all the proposals, we're stuck in the water. So thank you all very much. And if I forget, I'll mean to thank you a couple more times as we go along. So our first committee is agency oversight, and that would be Paul Lively.
Yes.
Actually, the agenda was amended. I was asking if Jennifer Hall could go first because she went last year.
Okay, well, I don't want to offend anybody, so fine. So we'll change the order if that's okay with everyone. All right, Jennifer, you go first.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for your time this evening. And I wanted just to briefly begin my presentation tonight by thanking each of you for your dedication to the New Trier Township. I'd also like to give special thanks to Brian Leverance for his continuing support and guidance and expertise in helping all of the New Trier Township committees stay on track and successfully complete their duties. His dedication to the township and its residents is truly stellar, and he should be commended for his unwavering support of all of us, both in the work that he does behind the scenes and at all of our committee meetings. So thank you, Brian. If 2020 has taught us anything, it is that we need to care about each other and our communities. And what we do here at New Trier Township and within our communities, it matters. As I'm sure all of you are aware, 2020 was a particularly challenging year for the committees, as well as all of the agencies. Where most of the operations were done virtually, clients with disabilities and the agencies who serve them were hit especially hard during the COVID pandemic. Clients with disabilities were often the first to lose their jobs. They became more isolated, which only compounded many of the complexities that were brought on by the challenges of the year. Agencies serving those with different populations had to come up with creative ways to engage clients in day service programming and to keep them busy while enduring losses of funding, reduced payment by state for virtual services, as well as to protect employees and working with at-risk clients. Increased costs for sanitizing facilities and residences was also a concern, and at an additional cost, as well as hazard pay for most employees. Money Follows the Person Committee also operated remotely, and members were unable to visit agencies personally. However, the process seemed to work once we all understood Zoom. And I want to thank each of our committee members for their continuing dedication and contributions to the New Trier Township and for their diligent consideration of both agency needs while maintaining a key eye on fiscal stewardship. Our committee members include Inez Gonzalez, Mitchell Doolin, Bridget Orth, Bruce Seltzer, Jessica Tucker, Tammy Smiley, and George Vandervold. This year, we allocated a total of $695,000, just 1.3% increase from last year's level of $685,500. Requests were $731,000, but for some agencies, services were significantly down, and we could not justify a larger allocation, or simply that the agencies did not ask for an increase. Agency by agency, we are making the following recommendations. Do you want me to bring up the list for any reason to see this, or just go through it?
Just go through it. I mean,
Okay.
they have the list in front of them, so.
Okay,
Yeah,
fantastic.
we've all got the list. Right?
Okay, terrific.
I don't.
The Center for Enriched Living asked for and received $25,000, which was the same as last year. They continue to serve the same number of clients for New Trier Township year after year and went virtual this year. They were one of the few agencies who made a conscious decision to furlough an equivalent of 10 full-time staff despite receiving PPP funding. All in-person programming was closed from March through June, and then they did some in-person. Of all members prior to the pandemic, 40% are now doing virtual, 20% are in person, and 40% none at all. Of New Trier Township clients, only 25% chose not to participate in any manner. The biggest hit to the agency was 70% loss in collected fees. They charged minimally for virtual programming. Second agency was Lamb's Farm. They asked for the same level of funding as last year, which was $18,000. They served the same number of New Trier Township clients last year and will likely continue to do so for the population as it ages. All of their clients are working in the community, lost their jobs due to the pandemic, and none have returned as of November, citing loss of job or concerns about safety regarding the ongoing pandemic. Most are in residential, and agency has shifted some staff from vocational to day programming through though some clients have moved home. They also received PPP funding of $1.84 million. The third agency is Arts of Life. They asked for and received an increase from $15,000 to $20,000 in terms of request. Agency got PPP money and did not lay off any staff, but they did not operate except remotely from March through August, with only half of the artists participating in their programming, at least initially. Nonverbal artists found that the remote programming platform was problematic. State pays a lower rate for remote programming as opposed to in-person programming. So we gave them an increase as a result of that. They also had to purchase iPads for their artists, and they hope to boost participation and are now doing some in-person programming at reduced capacity. Next agency is SNAP at Glencoe Youth Services. A longtime social program for special needs adults asked for a modest increase to $10,000, and it was granted. They closed for only 2 weeks in March, but have since been operating remotely with only a small drop off in clients participating, though they have not added any new clients at this time. The new director had a lot of good ideas for programming, but the pandemic has prevented it from being implemented at this time.
Of our groups, doing virtual programming, are we planning on making them whole as the year goes on and they start doing more actual programming? Are we making any provision for an increase as the year goes on?
Our committee discussed specifically looking at what the needs were at the time and what they were requesting for. And there was only a slight decrease for one of the agencies that was significant due to respite services that I'll highlight. But everything else stayed pretty standard. I don't know if I've answered your question. I think the concern going forward, and the committee discussed this, is that because the pandemic has not subsided and that it seems to continue to be problematic, that some of these issues may be having to be dealt with next year.
Yeah, I suspect it's a great unknown. We just don't know what it's going to be, but my guess is as programming continues, there are going to be greater costs because the programming will change what it looks like.
Well, but in addition to that, the hope would be also that there'd be greater participation so that income levels would also, there'd be some offset of costs with regards to that, so that there's a combination of sort of lack of participation, and that's causing a cost variable as well.
And maybe that's something you could check into a little, Brian, as to what planning, contingency planning they're engaging in as we go through the year.
At all of our agencies?
In general, all our agencies, and specifically with the MFT, the group we're dealing with now, because they're more impacted.
Yeah, the interesting thing about SNAP is that, I mean, other than moving to virtual, they haven't had a very big drop in the number of participants.
Right.
And it hasn't impacted the program that much in terms of, especially a social program. So
right.
They have a good participation. It's just everybody's online now. The
Right.
thing they did mostly
And
before was
that's
do dinners.
creating greater penetration into the community in ways we hadn't imagined before.
Yeah.
But we
Well-
should keep watching because there are opportunities for us to get this group more involved. Anyway,
No, but in
just kind of
speaking-
monitor that, Brian.
And
Okay.
speaking specifically to SNAP as well, one of the pivots that their programming did, because SNAP does a great deal with sort of community meals and getting together and having social and that reduction in social isolation, is that they actually started delivering meals and baskets and having the same
Right.
sort of interaction. So people were sharing that time, although they couldn't be together, they were sharing meals in their own space.
Which might, for this group, be actually more meaningful. Okay. A great thought just passed through my mind. It came back. You should be aware, Jen, that as we began our meeting today, we learned of a FOIA request on your committee. So you should get together with Brian and Jerome. And I can only tell you that we need to deal with this one real quickly because this person will not forget. But we need to get on that right away.
Okay.
Okay. Alan,
Brian's taking care of all the, he's just done a great job. Brian did tremendous work on time to get.
Okay, I just want to make sure we cover this because
delivering it to the requester. And Jen,
I'll talk about it with Jen later.
Okay,
great.
Thank you very much.
Great. Then just make sure we're dealing with it because I can't, but it needs to be.
Absolutely. Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
Okay, so the next organization is Glenkirk, and we funded them. There was a request for 110,000. We're suggesting funding for 97,500. Overall, there's a $2,000 decrease from last year's funding, but we look to increase funding for vocational and residential at their requests of 46,500 and 31,000 respectively. The cut was to respite services, and this is what I was referring to earlier, which has been at an operating capacity of only 35% this year, specifically due to the pandemic. People have not been utilizing respite services as a capacity, as people have not been utilizing it. So funds have remained unspent. We reduced funding from $30,000 to $20,000 in response to that. Our funding for respite is meant to provide a higher wage for workers serving New Trier Township clients, but families with members with disabilities have been staying away from the service despite Glenkirk doing its best to observe COVID protocols. Glenkirk's vocational program has mostly been suspended as a result of the pandemic, with staff being moved to residential for day services. Glenkirk, like other agencies that serve clients with disabilities and day services, has had some COVID cases as well as deaths, both among staff and clients, despite their best efforts. The next agency is Clearbrook, and it requested funding for 3 programs: children's services, residential, and vocational. Only the children's services programs asked for an increase. The other 2 programs did not ask for an increase. We're looking to grant the increase for children's services, bringing the total to Clearbrook funding to $52,000, up from $50,000 last year. It's been a difficult year for them as they have a large number of residential clients and vocational clients who have also been greatly impacted by this past year with COVID. Vocational services have been completely suspended and staff have shifted to residential to provide in-home services to clients. Agencies spent over $2.5 million on COVID-related expenses, including hazard pay and staff bonuses, as well as retention incentives for their employees, including sanitizing and getting clients technology access. They did not receive any PPP funding as they are too large of an organization. The next agency is Special Gifts Theater, and they requested $30,000. That would be $25,000 for their youth theater program and $5,000 for their adult theater program. While they're now doing all of their theater programming remotely, they are serving the same number of clients and are still using mentors in the same way that they have in past years for the youth program. We believe as a committee that it's a very important program and a lifeline for clients, especially in a time during where there's high levels of isolation, and that this agency has found an innovative way of doing that. It's New Trier Township clients are 35% of its entire caseload, and it's filled a really nice niche with so many other services and social opportunities as they've disappeared over time with COVID. Next agency is Our Place of New Trier Township, and they'd asked for an increase from 130,000 to 140,000, but the committee is requesting that we keep them at the same level. Their level of service is down more than 25%, as a significant number of clients have chosen not to participate remotely. So again, this is taking a look at sort of the pivoting of the agencies going from in-person to utilizing online platforming. They operated virtually until summer, and then they used their new space or the outside for some of their programming and are now using the inside for limited programming opportunities. They did not reduce staff, and the fees are down significantly as well. But the agency does have resources and reserves, and also completed a major remodeling this past year. Since it's primarily a social program and cannot fully be utilized in terms of its space due to the pandemic, we did not feel that we could grant them the increase this year. The next agency is Our House, and Our House has been an interesting mix of both public and private money to secure housing for individuals with disabilities in New Trier Township. They asked for an increase, but the committee was uncomfortable granting an increase this year when the house has been one resident short over a year. It's designed for 4 people, but they have only had 3 people in residence during the last, now going into 2 years. So during the pandemic, one of their staff members also left, which also cut expenses. And we felt as a committee that until they have a 4th person, we should keep them at the same level, and that they should make finding a 4th person for that 4th space a priority. Next agency is Jocelyn Center. They provide intensive therapy to clients with mental illness, and their caseload has been up during this difficult year. The agency also expanded into Lake County, so their size and budget is way up as well. While we are not funding their Lake County clients, we do note that an increased caseload and higher stress levels of persons with mental illness have taken their toll on the agency. And we saw this across the board in that the pandemic has definitely had an uptick in terms of mental health considerations for the township. We increased their funding request. They had requested 195,000. We're requesting 190,000. They have been operating remotely, and they do have a wait list for psychiatry, and New Trier Township clients do pay a lower fee, which are subsidized since very few clients actually pay fees as they are low income. The agency also took over employment services for Impact Behavioral Health Care, which we used to fund once upon a time, but it's now at Jocelyn. The next agency is Thresholds, and looking at $50,000, which is the same as last year, and they did not ask for an increase this year. Our funding helps New Trier Township clients, which are about 1% of their clients, costing the agency about $265,000 to serve, but 2/3 of the budget comes from the state. This year saw a significant rise in hospitalizations of mentally ill clients due to increased social isolation and substance abuse, and numerous positive COVID tests. Next agency is Search Disability Awareness Players. They requested the same amount of funding from last year, which is $10,000 for the players. They are known for doing disability awareness training and each year have committed to doing at least 5 trainings in New Trier Township. With the COVID pandemic, they have done some online as well as virtual trainings, and this may open up additional opportunities for them. Once again, they've committed to doing 5 trainings for the township this year. The next agency is NAMI, or the National Association of Mental Illness. The local chapter requested $20,000. And we're requesting, making a suggestion for the same level of funding as last year. The funds are for the general operating expenses across a variety of programming benefiting the township, including Family to Family, which provides training to families on how to cope with families that have members with mental illness. The funds include stipends for teachers for programming, which was a prior township recommendation, and we have assisted them in recruiting persons to perform the training. The agency has had some issues with evaluation and completion of forms, but there is a new director on board and has provided some stability. And we're looking to do some education and training specifically with first responders and offering more courses pertaining to the challenges of dealing with mental illness. The next agency is the Institute for Therapy Through the Arts, and their requested funding for the second year. We gave them $10,000 last year, and this year they were asking for the same level of funding. However, we did note that there was a level of subsidy to New Trier Township residents was less than the $10,000 figure. And in fact, only 8 New Trier Township clients were served, and 2 clients from New Trier Township actually paid a reduced fee. While the full fee is still less than what it costs the agency to provide the service, the 2 New Trier Township clients use the service frequently. We felt that the $7,500 was more than fair. As a committee, we felt that they need to continue efforts at promoting awareness of their services to individuals with disabilities and working on making the virtual services more available to clients. And finally, as an agency, we have, as a committee, we have 1 new agency applying entitled Total Link to Community. And they provide employment services to individuals with disabilities, specializing in customized employment. It's considered a very staff intensive program, considered time consuming and expensive because they do one-on-one individualized matching for jobs. But they do have a higher success rate for job placement and longer job retention than traditional employment programs for individuals with disabilities. We did not fund this program many years ago because it did not have a good success rate or retention rate for those it worked with. But those issues do seem to have been resolved and addressed appropriately. And through the pandemic, it has impacted them well, and some of their clients have lost jobs. We funded them this first year at a level of $10,000. Of the 130 placed since the agency's inception, 92% were still employed after 1 year. So
in this subject area, it's incredibly important for that one-on-one training and involvement, much more than most of the other services we provide. So it's difficult to do an apples and apples comparison with other types of programming because this is so intensive for virtually all of the programs we're doing in this Money Follows the Person area. And it raises the question, are we getting any significant pushback on the part of the agencies when you're saying, okay, on an apples and apples thing, you're spending less money per unit of service than you have been? I'm just curious, because I know in other programming like this across the state and across the country, the cost per unit are much higher.
Because this is the first year that we're funding it, I think that may be something to look at for next year in terms of reflection. I can tell you that in terms of how the staff interviewed when we were asking as a committee questions, one of the pieces that continued to come up was the good fit match of a job, and being able to have individuals not only find a job in today's workforce, which is changing and the pandemic has absolutely changed it, but also having it be something that people really like and it matches that piece. And we had
Right,
not.
so when you're adding the COVID difficulties along to just the innate difficulty of providing one-on-one services to a very difficult population, you're dealing with a very, it's very, a lot of work here. So
Yeah, I would just add that,
congratulations.
you know, it goes back 6 or 7 years when they came to the township for funding for the first time, and the MFP committee did not fund them. And one of the things that I remember well is that they were a much younger agency, and their success rate with clients, despite the high cost, was only about 30% of clients were still on the job after a certain period of time. Now they were up to 90% clients after in a year. So they've improved in the most, what I would think is the most significant piece of information drastically. Of course, that's before COVID. They readily admit in a recent conversation that, you know, some of their clients have lost their jobs because of COVID. But to have a success rate before COVID of 90% being in the jobs for over a year is a fantastic number. That's much better than other traditional employment programs of people with disabilities.
Right. Yeah, just looking at the raw numbers, I couldn't help but be impressed with that success rate.
It's still high cost, but
Oh,
a
that's going to
retention
be,
of a year is
this is going to
fantastic.
be a high cost service, no matter what we do. It's going to cost.
Absolutely. And just in conclusion, our total funding was $695,000, plus $10,000 for the new agency being the total link to community. The committee gave careful consideration to all of the agencies, but kept in mind that this was also a pandemic year that presented numerous challenges for many. We're hoping for a safer, happier, and healthier 2021. And thank you for your time and for your consideration on behalf of the Money Follows the Person Committee. And I will answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to say, Jen, that it was an outstanding presentation, and I really admire all the hard work that you and the committee did during these unprecedented times. I did not serve as a liaison to a committee during this difficult year, but I have served for many years as the trustee liaison, and I've also served as a committee chair and as a committee member going way back in time. And I think what's noteworthy, and I'm not only speaking to you, Jen, I'm speaking also to our other committee chairs here. I'm speaking to Paul and I'm speaking to Ed, is that we're really operating in a most unprecedented year. And for all our agencies, none of them have ever faced anything even close to what they faced beginning in March of this year. So my gut feeling always in, making decisions as a member of the board and who we're going to fund and how much we're going to fund, my gut feeling usually, traditionally, historically, is to follow the recommendations very carefully of the committees, because I respect the process. But this year, we're operating in such an unscientific manner compared to all prior years. And my gut feeling is, it's a high burden to not give to give an agency less than we have in the prior year. And the reason I say that, in the prior year and the prior years, we go about this very scientifically. We evaluate all the variables that we look at, and there's science behind it. And this year, it's so hard to do things scientifically. We're in such uncharted waters. So what I want to get to is it seems like there are two agencies that the committee singled out for actually getting a little bit less than they got the year before, the scientific year, if you will. And
only one
I just
agency
want you to
got
give us
less.
a little bit more color on why Glenkirk this year, this unknown year, is getting about $2,500, is getting about $2,000 less per the recommendation of the committee than they had in the prior year. And I think it has to do with respite services. And how can we be certain as the funding entity that's a proper decision? What is it about the decrease in and services provided and respite that allow us to make that leap and to give them less than we gave them in the year before.
Let me check in here for a second. I hear everything that Elliot's saying, but as a liaison to this committee, I think it's almost a waste of time to try and double guess them at this stage. They worked very hard. I watched them. Most of the time I didn't understand what they're talking about, but I really can't think why we ought to make changes in their recommendations.
And I'm not inclined to do anything other than follow the recommendations, John, but I just want a little bit more color so I understand a little bit more about, I understand that all of our agencies provided less services this year than they have in past years. But what was it about the drop off in respite that makes you feel, that gives you confidence in the recommendation?
Thank you for your question. Because it is such a changed year and sort of, the black swan moment, right? To take a look at it, one of the main areas that we looked at was the fact that they still had funds that had been unspent. And so in terms of a funding aspect is to taking a look at where they had funds as an organization and making the assumption that once COVID or the speculation that once COVID clears, that there would be more desire to have respite services. There was still funding that had not been spent as a result of sort of a pacing. So we haven't outpaced in terms of that specific program. And I don't know if, Brian, if you want to add anything more to that.
Yeah, exactly. This is the one program, even though like vocational was shut down, they still incurred expenses to serve those people during the day. Instead of being in jobs, they were in their residential facilities and they had to allocate staff to them. So in some ways, the program actually increases expenditures. But in respite, that program expends funds simply when clients are being served by a respite worker. And 35%, what was the number I used? It's only operating at 35% of capacity. So this program is mostly funded by the state. Our funding allowed this agency to provide our respite workers a greater wage as an incentive for people from New Church Township to use the program, which they are not using. So therefore, money could not be shifted to other programs. It is sitting unspent. Hopefully next year that will change when this pandemic, slows down. But for now, the money is not being expended and they can't really shift it across programs. So it didn't make sense to give them money that is not going to be spent.
Yeah, Brian, I think you'll recall going back many, many years with Glenkirk that the goal has been to give New Trier residents a leg up, if you will.
Yes.
In receiving the services. My daughter is 30, I don't know, she's old, 32 now, and was in this program when she was a teenager. And this identical problems existed back then. Finding available respite workers. It was a terrific problem back then.
So very satisfactory answer. Same question briefly on Institute for Therapy of the Arts, a much smaller agency, much less capital than Glenkirk. We're going to be, the recommendation is to fund Institute for Therapy through the Arts at about $2,500 less than the prior scientific year. Can you shed just a little bit more color on that, Jen?
Absolutely. Thank you for your question. That was simply the pragmatics of numbers, that the New Trier Township clients that were being served was down, and that we could not justify as a committee based on units served the request. So that was just simply what I would say in terms of enumeration of taking a look at the 8 New Trier Township clients being served, and that out of those 8 clients, 2 of them actually were the largest utilizers of that service. I don't know if
So
Brian.
those 2 big utilizers were no longer in the picture in the year.
Yeah,
I would just say that, for almost all the agencies that we fund on this committee, it is not possible for us to fund the level of service that is provided to New Church Township residents. These are multi-million-dollar agencies providing millions of dollars of service to our residents for which the state does not fully fund them, and they have to find money from the outside to help bring that number up. It says specifically in our funding criteria that we take into account the level of service to New Church Township residents. And in the case of ITA, we were able to specifically say the subsidy to our clients from this agency is roughly $7,500. So we are fully funding the deficit for this organization. It's not $10,000, it was $7,500. To be fully funding the deficit for our residents is something that we are able to do for very few agencies. So I would think that, you know, the agency would certainly be more than understanding about the level of funding.
Yes, I mean, we have wonderful criteria, but again, those aren't written for a pandemic year. So again, just one of my notions was that I wanted to be convinced that if the recommendations are to fund an agency at less than the prior scientific year's level of funding, I wanted to just be very careful and make sure that we had good rationale for it. And I'm going to ask those same questions to the other two committee chairs for those agencies that are being funded at lower than a prior year's request. But Jen, again, outstanding presentation. Thank you for very difficult and tedious work during a very difficult time.
Thank you.
I have a
Okay,
question about our house. They had discussed also kind of trying to guide others through their model to try to have other similar programs established throughout the community. Have they made any progress in that regard?
That did not come up in terms of what we had discussed. I know that that has been discussed in the past. I think the focus this year had been specifically on trying to find a fourth member for the house that they do have, and to figure out whether they were going to try to retain their second staff member who had to be reduced during the pandemic. Brian, do you know anything else about that?
Yeah, I've spoke with Jane Gallery about this issue, and you know, during the pandemic, it just wasn't realistic to be trying to find another house right now. I mean, people are too leery about sharing space right now. So this is another example of how the pandemic has affected organizations unable to expand their services.
True. And I could imagine that the housing stock has gotten more inflated price-wise.
okay. Are there any other questions for Jen? If not, thank you. Thank you very much. And we'll move to mental health. And John, that's you, I believe. Yes. No,
No.
I erased that. It's Ed. I apologize.
That's okay.
Wrong list. Okay. So,
Well, on behalf of the Mental Health Committee, I also would like to thank Brian for the tremendous insight he has in the agencies we review and his excellent guidance in our deliberations. He's truly a jewel to cherish. Okay. The committee is comprised of the following members who participated via Zoom throughout the process. Jerome Ginsburg, who is serving his 6th and final year on the committee. Leslie Wyrick, Carol Cohen, Richard Drake, Nan Ham, and Laura Copeland. We met virtually throughout the fall, and again, it seemed to work well. The committee allocated a total of $509,000, which is an increase from last year's allocation of $484,000, but less than the request this year of $522,000. We had 13 agencies to review, and these are our recommendations. The first agency, Haven, which provides a variety of mental health programs for youth and their families, asked for and received the same level of funding as last year, $118,000. This is the primary organization serving youth in crisis in our community, and usage is up during the pandemic. It's been a 50-50 mix of telehealth and in-person services for Haven. And by adding staff this year, they eliminated a waiting list and continue to not charge for services. PPP money replaced dollars they lost from the cancellation of their fundraising benefit. The harbor.
I would just add one thing real quick, Ed, and that's the fact that Haven added a site this year right across from the high school. And so in addition to the site that they have on Green Bay Road, they are now able to serve students right across the street from the high school. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. Our next agency that we reviewed was Harbor, again, which provides emergency shelter for homeless youth. They asked for the same level of funding as last year, $13,000, but the committee felt it was being generous just by giving them $5,000, since they have served no New Trier Township clients in the last 18 months. We looked at the numbers served over the last 5 years, and we have been overfunding them for the most part, but always considered the agency kind of an insurance policy for when it was needed. But since no one from our community has been served for the last 18 months, we decided to reduce funding considerably. This is not a critique of their performance, just a recognition that it's a service not being utilized by our residents. Peer Services, which deals with education and treatment of substance abuse, asked for and received $105,000, an amount that is $500 less than last year. $30,000 is for adolescent treatment, $50,000 for adult treatment, and $25,000 for prevention services, which is $500 less than last year. The level of funding for treatment takes into account the level of service to our residents and the fact that our funding guarantees that no New Trier Township resident will be placed on a waiting list. Because of the pandemic and to reduce costs, the agency closed its Glenview site this year and reports that they have a lower appointment cancellation rate when they use Zoom, but did not realize how dependent they were on court referrals, which have decreased greatly since the pandemic. Prevention services have been more problematic during the pandemic, but agency reports substance abuse issues are higher now. Now, the next agency, the Cancer Wellness Center, which supports education and treatment for families dealing with cancer, asked for an increase for the first time and received it from $10,000 to $15,000, still far below the level of free services provided to New Trier Township residents. But this is the first time they have asked for an increase since we first started funding them. They moved seamlessly to telehealth, continue to offer free services, and have finally instituted a comprehensive outcome evaluation system, as we have been urging them to do. The next agency, Erica's Lighthouse, which provides depression awareness programs, asked for the same level of funding as last year, $16,000. They continue to do an excellent job developing a new curriculum, new training videos, revising their evaluation process, and expanding well beyond our communities into being a national organization. But only a fraction of their services are in this community, and they have well over a year of reserves, so we continue to keep them at the same level of funding. All three family service agencies moved quickly to telehealth services and report that for many clients, it seems to be the preferred method of service delivery and will no doubt continue at some level well after the pandemic is over. Usage stayed the same or even increased in some cases. Family Services of Wilmette asked for an increase from $65,000 to $70,000 and received it. And we note that subsidies to Nutria Township clients are well over the amount. Counseling Center of the North Shore asked for an increase for the first time in many years and received it from $32,000 to $42,000. Their funding was greatly affected by the pandemic as they had to close the thrift shop for 3 months and business is still down and competition is up. Glencoe Family Services did not ask for an increase and received $40,000. They continue to benefit by being located in the Village Hall and have reserves of over 1 year. The Children's Advocacy Center is funded for 2 programs totaling $8,000. We funded the family support at the same $1,500 level as last year per the request and gave a small increase for their request to the CASI program, which is a program which coordinates interviews for sexually abused children with the legal department. The CASI program was increased from $6,000 to $6,500. They too went seamlessly to telehealth, though for some investigative interviewing with children and follow-up support services that was not possible and was performed with proper COVID protocols. Our funding is roughly proportionate to the level of service to Nutria Township clients, taking into account state funding. The next agency, Youth Services, administers 2 programs for the township and other communities. Its Outreach Share program does a variety of educational and prevention programming in the community, and Pride Youth, which is a support group for LGBTQ youth. The Pride program was more affected by pandemic, with many youth not participating virtually, so we chose not to increase their funding request, but kept it at the same level as last year, $20,000. We increased Share to its request of $25,000. This agency also moved seamlessly to virtual services. The next agency, the YWCA, we have had a funding agreement with the YWCA for many years, whereby we allocate $25,000 and they do not place any Nutria Township woman on a waiting list for domestic violence for courtroom advocacy. Some years they have given more than $25,000 worth of services, some years slightly less. They did serve 15 Nutria Township clients this year, 1 for an extended stay in shelter, 9 in legal advocacy, and 5 in counseling. So we feel we got our money's worth this year. The agency had a stressful year as they had to move clients in the shelter into a hotel in order to enforce social distancing, and it cost them a lot of money. Agency also operates a batterers program and have enhanced services beyond orders of protection. The next agency, the Zacharias or Z Center, which provides counseling and crisis intervention for survivors of sexual abuse, is back for a 3rd year, asking for $5,000, which we granted. Though we do have some issues with this agency, including incomplete funding forms for a 3rd straight year and high reserve levels, the agency has expanded services by opening a 2nd office in Skokie and still has waiting lists for its services. They also moved quickly to virtual services and have improved their response rates to surveys and enhanced the evaluation process, which we recommended. Now, finally, the last agency, SamaraCare, which also provides mental health counseling, is back for a 2nd year, and we granted their increase in funding from $10,000 to $15,000. They served 52 Nutria Township households, and the deficit in services because of sliding scale was over $20,000. They have been extremely responsive to our recommendations by making their sliding fee scale more generous and still offer a unique service based on spiritual counseling for those that request it. Okay, thank you. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Terrific report, and questions for Ed?
Ed, again, a terrific report, and I appreciate your hard work and your great reporting during this very difficult, unprecedented year. I've got two questions for you. With regard to the mental health agencies that provide virtual counseling or virtual services, did they comment about their thoughts about the efficacy of those services? From their perspective, do they think they're able to do as good a job in the virtual format?
From the interviews we've had with the representatives from the agencies, it seems that they're doing a very adequate job. They're reaching more people because a number of clients find it a lot easier doing it by telemedicine than making the commute. Even if a one-on-one interview would be more desirable, the risks involved seem to balance out. And I think most of the counseling services are satisfied with telehealth and would plan to use it after the pandemic is over for the clients which find it more convenient, especially the elderly and those who are disabled, to meet with a therapist.
Because I can see how the clients might like it better, but I'm wondering if any of the clinicians actually shared with you guys whether they feel they're getting through or picking up as much as they would in person.
There's no way, clinician, speaking as a clinician, there is no way you can get the same amount of information on a view screen as you have in person. The watching body movements, facial expressions makes all the difference in terms of obtaining a history. So it's adequate under the pandemic circumstances.
And then my second and final question.
Let me add something real quick, Elliot, to that. I have actually had conversations with all the agency directors about this very issue. All of the agencies doing telehealth, and in some respect, it's too early to really know. But as Ed said, there's a much lower cancellation rate now with this type of service, which means people are doing a better job of staying in the service, which, the continuity of service has always been an issue with mental health agencies. The one population that they have said that there is some concerns about its effectiveness with are youth. Youth are kind of burned out about, because they're doing tele classrooms in school right now. Youth have a little bit shorter attention span. And so there are some concerns about the youth population and its effectiveness. Again, the jury is still out on it. The population that is definitely having a harder time with it are certain clients with disabilities who have communication type issues. Not surprisingly, most of the agencies report some difficulties with clients that have severe disabilities. So again, the jury is still out on that, but those are some preliminary indications.
Brian and Dr. Ollinger, thank you for your insights. But my final question, Ed, is with regard to Harbor, I have the same concerns that I communicated to Jen. We're cutting them substantially from the prior scientific year's funding. That's a decrease of 13,000 to 5,000. And I understand apparently that they didn't see any Nutrien clients. The reason we kept them at 5,000 was that insurance policy rationale to just kind of, have there ever been any prior years where they haven't treated or provided services to Nutrien Township clients?
No.
Brian, never.
And no, I went back as far as I could go with the proposals. I went back about 5 to 6 years, and they've always served some Nutrien Township clients. I would also add that in the 20 plus years I've been here, we have never ever given money to an agency that did not provide some level of service to Nutrien Township clients. So this is the first where we've given money to an agency that did not serve anybody from our community, not just this year, but for 18 prior months.
And given the size of Haven and its overall funding, do you gentlemen have an assessment as to what type of impact the loss of that $8,000 might have overall?
To Harbor?
to Harbor?
Well, I think in general, you know, the relationship between homeless youth and services provided by communities is evolving. I think there's a lot quicker response to finding, you know, youth who are without a place to spend a night, making a more definitive appointment with some place to stay available. So I think the general need for shelter, okay, a generic shelter may be being reduced over the last several years. You know, I think not only in New Trier Township, but maybe everywhere. I think as the response, you know, is more rapid to youth now. So that may be part of the fact that we haven't had any need for a New Trier Township child going into a homeless shelter.
Forgive me, I have one follow-up, and I don't want to monopolize, but Ed and Brian, what was Harbor's rationale, knowing that they hadn't provided services to a township resident for 18 months? What was their rationale behind asking for the same level of funding?
Well, it's always a game in the funding process, as it is at the, you know, federal, state, and local budget level. Do you ask for what you want? Do you ask for what you need? Or do you ask for what you think you can get? And I don't know. That question wasn't asked of them. It wasn't answered by them. And I think what Ed said earlier, though, about the fact that Haven has been the agency in this community that would likely send somebody to Harbor. Haven used to pay Harbor $10,000 a year as kind of an insurance policy in case they sent youth there. They have stopped giving them that $10,000 because Haven does a much better job than they did 5 years ago in making sure that kids can stay at home and don't have to be referred out. They used to have foster families in the community, and when the state made some serious changes to the level of training required to become a foster family, a lot of parents got turned off by that. And Haven has tried to make up for that by offering very intensive services to families to ensure that kids don't have to be sent to a shelter. So the most common reason kids are sent to shelters now has changed. Teenage pregnancy is not the problem it used to be. The biggest issue now why kids are sent to shelters, be it boys or girls, is if they come out as gay or transgender. That's the world we're in right now. So that is still something that is unacceptable to many families. And the biggest number of people that have been sheltered at both Shelter Inc., which is the shelter for boys, and Harbor, which is a shelter for girls, is transgender issues or gay.
Ed and Brian, thank you.
And Elliot, I was the liaison on that committee, so I did want to point to a response that I think would be responsive in their application. In response to question 17, they did say they did remind us that Supervisor Goldberg had concerns about the number of New Trier Township youth served with its emergency shelter compared to the funding provided by New Trier Township. And then this is verbatim. In our fiscal year 2020 report, the Harbor saw several months of lower than usual overall utilization across all programs due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which affected our ability to conduct outreach and maintain critical communication with local schools. To address this challenge, the Harbor has begun to utilize a mobile unit to conduct outreach within the community and distribute health and wellness supplies, masks, thermometers, hand sanitizer to youth. While our mobile outreach unit is currently anchored in Schaumburg, we are gradually increasing our footprint and will place priority on a presence in New Trier Township.
Yeah, I question if that's going to make any difference, quite frankly, but outreach is good.
Right, and that was a concern of the committee, but that is their response.
Elliot?
Go ahead, Jen.
Oh, thank you. Elliot, I'm on the CCNS board, And their clinicians have said that after, the initial adjustment period, and there are some clients who don't like doing virtual conferences and whatnot. But from their perspective, they're feeling quite comfortable, at least one agency is, this one agency, with the level of interaction and service that they are able to provide. They say the people who like virtual counseling, they feel they've been able to adjust very nicely, and get a good rapport going with them and are quite comfortable with it. So if that helps.
Thanks, Jim.
To follow up on Elliot's questioning, it's my understanding that you did cut Angel, and same question, which is basis for cutting them was the lack of participation in the LGBT group in particular?
No, we didn't cut them. We just didn't give them their request.
Oh, I thought it was a cut, Brian. Thank you.
No.
They were at 40,021 and 45 for 22.
Yeah, the participation is way down in the Pride Youth Program. So we didn't cut them. We just didn't give them an increase.
Well, they got it, overall, they got a $5,000 increase.
Yes.
Not the full 10,000 they were asking for.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, well, thanks a lot. Again, we're dead in the water without you guys running these committees and making sure that we get this information. So thanks. And now we go to Paul, I think, if I didn't screw it up again.
Paul, you're on mute.
I am. Good.
Paul, you're on mute.
Oh,
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
oh, good.
It's good to have a trustee liaison, right?
We work together.
There you go.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by saying that we reviewed 10 previously funded agencies which had reapplied. We had a new first-time application for the Hadley School for the Blind. And one of our agencies from last year, Argentium, did not reapply. I would like to thank our committee members for their work on these agencies. Deborah Hahami, Patricia Balsamo, Ellen Van Vechten, Melissa Frey, Brian Brandt, Sharon Weingarten, and Mary Gerlitz, and David Barta. I'm not going to put any accolades for Brian after he's gone through 2 of these already. The one thing I would say that nobody else has said, I think that Brian adds an historical perspective to our discussions, which I think really helps us stay on track and keep us focused on what's important. Obviously, we had fewer committee meetings this year because of the state mandated shutdown. Where I think it really hurt us particularly was not being able to have as many liaison communications with our agencies. They were all scrambling, we were scrambling. And so while we got some feedback via email and other means of communication, it wasn't kind of the typical follow-up that we would have. All of these agencies were trying to stay relevant in a totally new environment, and some were more successful than others. But to Trustee Robbins' comment, our committee has taken the approach that each returning agency should get a pass as to its funding from last year. They rely on our funding level to exist. And even though this year was a bad year for most of them, if not all of them, that doesn't mean that in the future they won't have success. So we wanted to kind of put a stake in the ground to give them some assistance. Just to summarize the awards, last year we had recommended awards totaling $435,165,000. This year's was a slight decrease, down to $432,500, and that decrease was partially because of a reduced request from the North Shore Senior Center, and then Argentium not renewing. Our total requests this year were $442,500, but we did not grant any request unless we felt there was reasonable merit to support it. I'd like to begin with one of our poster child agencies. Its proposals are always complete and well presented, and that's Rebuilding Together. The committee had recommended increasing last year's funding by $10,000 to $40,000, which was per the agency's request. Importantly, all of our funding goes towards home rehab projects in New Trier Township, and every dollar is spent on direct, concrete, and visible benefits to our residents. It continues to expand in New Trier Township. We are encouraging that expansion. The agency has few overhead expenses, and the pandemic kind of shifted its focus from inside rehab projects to outside rehab projects. But if there were inside emergencies, it responded to those as well. Another agency which has seemed to make a fairly effective adjustment to the pandemic is the Alliance for Early Childhood. Last year, the committee recommended a little over $6,000 to support the Let's Play project, which has widespread community support and is really has events that are designed to get kids outside and engaged. This year, the committee had to shift gears a little bit and requested $7,500 to largely fund a new program called, and I quote, the Infant Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation for Parents and Educators, unquote. It includes programs including a preschool director's reflective practice group, professional learning sessions for early childhood educators, a parent education series, and childhood educator practice groups. The idea here is to provide support to educators and parents during the pandemic. All of these programs are to be presented online and led by a recognized parenting consultant. The next agency is the North Suburban Legal Clinic. It requested an increase from $8,000 to $15,000. $12,000 is recommended as being in line with the level of service provided to 21 New Trier Township clients. The funding is for general operating support for legal services in the areas of domestic violence, immigration, and landlord-tenant relations. The agency continues to grow its services and budgets, but we do want to see it expanding its outreach in the township. The next agency is the Career Resource Center. It asked for an increase from $20,000 from $16,000. We split the difference at $18,000. About 10% of its clients are from New Trier Township, and based on the size of its budget and the fees paid by its clients, we felt the funding was appropriate. It will help transition its services from in-person to a virtual format. We all have concerns about that, but the committee notes that even though the unemployment is up, the CRC's numbers have declined due to the governor's shutdown, but an increased usage is projected. The next agency is the Volunteer Center, which has been and continues to be a strong contributor to community volunteerism. It requested an increase of $2,000, but we're recommending that we keep it funding at last year's level of $15,000 due to an absence of clear support for its increase. Many of its services are web-based, making the pandemic somewhat less impactful. While temporarily losing its space at Skokie School due to the school's district's need for the space, And while the pandemic has made it more difficult for volunteers to connect with opportunities, the agency did hold its annual Make a Difference Day. It produced a safe volunteering guide, and it has received increased requests for assistance from local nonprofits. The township has provided website funding for the agency over the last 2 years, and we continue to ask the agency to request its board members to increase their contributions. The Meals on Wheels of Northeastern Illinois requested $25,000, which was the same as last year. But we all know this was in addition to the Township Board's earlier special allocation to assist the kitchen expansion. It started its own kitchen, so it wouldn't have to rely on procuring food from hospital kitchens and other providers. The agency's budget and people served have increased, but not necessarily by New Trier residents. There were just 13 clients in the past year ending June 30th. Increasing client requests for fee subsidies are straining the budget. While the agency is providing a critical service, we're going to try to stress with them increased involvement in New Trier Township. North Shore Senior Center reduced its request from the funding of the previous year of $160,000 to $145,000. This was a reduction due to an approximate 25% drop off in demand for adult daycare services, and these are all now being done virtually. For the other programs, the committee recommends funding the agency's requests due to issues of increased isolations of seniors and related health concerns resulting from the pandemic. Now we get to a couple interesting issues here. Hadley School for the Blind. This offers online courses for the visually impaired. However, the users called learners seem to start these courses but not complete them. The agency's research suggests it should shorten the courses for what it calls the learning platform, which is now being developed. It requested $5,000, which the committee did not approve. It was kind of a tough decision. On the one hand, we understand that Hadley School for the Blind is across the street. It's a well-respected organization with an international following. It reported last year that it served more than 176,000 learners in 50 states and 65 countries. It's been in existence now for 100 years. On the other hand, I just want to note that the $5,000 funding request is 0.00059% of its proposed budget of $8.4 million. The agency has $80 million in unrestricted reserves and another $10 million in pure endowment. Interest from the reserve and the endowment funds more than half the $8.4 million budget and paid for its recent major and highly visible remodeling construction project. Of particular interest also is that no agency executive came to the committee to demonstrate any actual need for the requested funding. The committee believes that good stewardship of taxpayer dollars requires denial of the funding request.
Paul, could I jump in for a minute?
Sure, absolutely.
I want everybody to be aware of the fact that this was a very protracted conversation with regard to Hadley, and it was an overwhelming number of the committee that did not want to do the funding. I made an impassioned plea to go ahead and fund them on the basis that they are part of our township, that many agencies come to the township for the affiliation with the township. And at the end of the day, I convinced one committee member to offer some funding, but not the full funding. So I think it's important for us to realize that as a group, the committee felt very strongly about not funding Hadley. It wasn't a close call.
That's true. I mean, I agree. It was, as I say, it was a difficult decision given their location within the community. But when you review their funding application and you look at their budget and you go, they want $5,000? How, if my neighbor asks me, you're going to give $5,000 for Hadley? It's really, quite frankly, a tough sell. And I think that's the way the committee looked at it. So
Paul, Stefan, can I ask you how many township residents does Hadley serve?
About 900 and some, as far as I know, as far as the report showed. I will say that there was even a committee.
Wait, let me, 900 township residents get service at Hadley?
No, I don't think the number was that high.
no, I don't think, I think it was.
I thought it was
Second, I can tell you.
943. Take a
Go
look.
ahead and keep talking. I got to look it up.
But in any event, Elliot, there was also a member of the committee who sought out services from Hadley for a family member, and the particular services that she wanted was not something that Hadley provided. So as universal as they are, this particular member of the committee didn't feel that they were providing the services which her particular needs required.
Let me kind of play the devil's advocate here because I'm concerned about Hadley. And as you've all pointed out, they are a neighbor of ours right down the street. Ed Ollinger's committee talked about the fact that Harbor was not providing any services to township residents during the funding cycle, but yet as an insurance policy, as a gesture of, we know that they could provide value in the future, we kept them around we're proposing to keep them around at the level of $5,000. Hadley is providing services to members of our township, apparently a large number. It's a very affluent agency, unlike perhaps the affluence of any other agency that we fund. But what about that kind of analysis, that this is a neighbor that provides services? And what about the policy of having a good relationship with them? Did the committee discuss that?
Yes, we did. We did. And
At length.
yeah, I mean, it was felt that there should be some kind of need for the funding. I mean, if we're looking just to have our logo on the Hadley School for the Blind website, maybe that's a decision that the committee was not going to make. But in terms of need, in terms of relationship to the other agencies' need, it just didn't exist. Again, it's such an infinitesimal part of the budget, and it's not like Haven or like the YWCA, where we're paying money for some type of insurance access. This is not a problem. The only thing they talked about in their funding application was the fact that they've had all of their learners, are not all, but most of their learners are dropping out of the programs because they're too long online. And so what they want to do is shorten up the programs and change their platform to try to keep people or their learners engaged. It was not really an issue about, gee, what are we doing for the township? That wasn't the spiel.
So you didn't feel there was really a rationale for even applying to the township for funds? Nothing that was carefully delineated or
Right.
expounded upon?
Right.
In fairness, I will reiterate though, based on their proposal, they said that they've created a new platform and that the new platform is designed for the modern age, if you will, in terms of shorter programming. They found that their old format did not work and that many people dropped out or didn't complete a particular program. And so they've gone to a new model. And I think that it's such a new model, it just got rolled out in July of 2020, that they may not know the full impact of it at this point, coupled with the fact that with the COVID pandemic, it's complicated matters even further. But Elliot, I made an impassioned plea and I got no, other than the one woman, I got no positive response, and the committee members were not inclined to fund this agency.
Stefan and Paul, thank you. Brian, were you able to find out how many New Trier Township residents?
I have to go downstairs and look. I don't have it. I just noted a lot of New Trier Township residents were served. You know, one of the problems was in defining what is service. Is it somebody who just signs up for a course but doesn't actually complete it? Is it somebody who actually, there was some misunderstanding about what exactly is a New Trier Township resident? What exactly is a client served?
Well, we know what a New Trier Township resident is. It's somebody who
Yeah,
resides.
it was in the hundreds of clients from New Trier Township.
In the hundreds, actually.
In the
get
hundreds,
service.
yes. So,
Thank you.
Okay,
Paul, continue on.
all right. I'm
The
gonna
hot
go-
button.
I'm going to go to the next stewardship challenge.
Oh, boy.
And this is presented by our 4 youth service agencies. I want to discuss the Warming House, the Winnetka Youth Organization, Glencoe Youth Services, and the Glencoe Junior High Project as a group, because they all kind of suffered the same impacts from the pandemic. The shutdown significantly aggravated the declining demand for their services. They all had to go to virtual gatherings and some outdoor programmings where weather permitted. Yet the agencies kept their normal staff levels. One of them had, I think this was the Warming House, got Paycheck Protection Program help. But as Brian was alluding to previously, online gathering is not an appealing format for students who are doing remote learning. So as you would expect, the youth participation has declined. But the declining is more than just pandemic related. The pandemic kind of highlights it. High school participation has been going down. Its programs mostly attract junior high school and middle school students. And so if we take a look at the New Trier Township guiding principles, the committee wonders if the agencies are really creating new energetic ideas and programs while maintaining existing programs which are relevant and effective. Our thought is that unless attendance picks up significantly once the pandemic is over, the board and the committee should look carefully at the large level of support for 4 similar agencies that are serving very few high school students and have had challenges adjusting their services, reducing staff, and collaborating effectively. Based upon our philosophy that we weren't going to cut anybody, we recommend the existing levels for the Warming House at 57,000. It had requested 3,000 increase, but we would not recommend that. The Winnetka Youth Organization hold at 55,000. The Glencoe Youth Services hold at 38,000, and the Glencoe Junior High Project at 20,000. I think going forward, the committee really wants to discuss considering possible suggestions for these agencies, including such things as centralized program administration, funding coordination, and possible input of the involved school districts. The Glencoe Youth Services has made some inroads with New Trier Township, the high school, and I think that's something that we might be able to possibly leverage to try to coordinate and make these agencies more efficient and more attractive. So that was it.
And just to reiterate what Paul said, the committee felt very strongly about the youth organizations. And I think the only reason that they funded them at the level they were previously at was, as one of the committee members said, this was a matter of survival for these particular agencies this year. And so they were going to give them a pass this year, but in subsequent years, they want to really scrutinize these agencies. There seems to be some duplication of services between the agencies. As Paul said, there's been a complete drop off of the high school age, and it's junior high and younger. There's the old argument, which I've been hearing for years now, that these should be consolidated under one agency. I spoke to the fact that in previous years this has come up, but that it's very difficult in the township. We have all these competing interests for all of these agencies to come together under one roof. But that was suggested. But the strong message was, we will fund them this year at their previous levels, but going forward, the committee in particular felt that they should undergo severe scrutiny in the future to see whether or not they're actually viable entities any longer, and whether we should continue funding them at the level we did. So I felt it was important to share that with everybody. Paul stated it, but I want to restate it further.
Right. Evan, thank you very much. And Paul, thank you for an excellent organized presentation and for your work during a very difficult, unprecedented year.
My pleasure.
Well, if that was your pleasure, do we have a job? No. Thank you again very much. Okay, well, thank you all. We're gonna take about a 2-minute break here.
Can I
And
add
then
one
we'll
thing
move
very
on
quickly?
to ordinary business that you're all welcome to stay for. But if you run like hell, you could get out of here.
I'm out of here.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Could I add one thing real quick, Alan?
Sure.
You know, several of the questions pointed out, you know, some differences in committee philosophies regarding funding, and I think that's an important distinction to make. And something that is worth noting is that each of the committees kind of has a different philosophy about the funding process and might do well with getting some direction from the board. For example, the Agency Oversight Committee has always looked upon themselves first and foremost as being stewards of public money, and that they tend to look very critically at agencies and what's the level of service of New Church Township residents. The Money Follows the Person Committee has always looked at themselves as kind of as advocates for people with disabilities, and they are generally eager to fund any organization that is providing services to people with disabilities. The Mental Health Committee has always been comprised primarily people that are very social work driven and tend to be very supportive of virtually any request. They tend to be the least critical of all the committees about funding requests that come in from agencies providing mental health services. So it's difficult to have a consistent philosophy across all three committees without some more specific direction from the board.
One of the things we might look at going into the next year is, and this would be something you have to think about, Brian, because it's going to fall on you. If
Okay.
we do it. And that would be putting together a manual of the services that we provide in general, and an agency, the township philosophy. How are we going to do this? What is our overreaching goal? How do we want to allocate what we're doing, and where do we apply priorities? And it's real difficult, because as you were going down the way the groups have kind of broken themselves out, there are different philosophies on how the agencies do it. And maybe that's something that we should sit down during the coming season and figure out how we're going to do it. Then again, it's something we've been talking about for about 20, 25 years or so, it seems like.
Yeah, and I would just add that, you know, it's not a criticism of the board at all. I've always explained, when committees have brought this issue up, I have always explained that the philosophy of the township board is to be as open as possible regarding funding. If you are serving people in our community, if you are a 501c3, if you meet certain minimum standards of, you know, transparency regarding your operations, that we are eager to fund you. We are eager to at least, you know, get an application from you, and then it's up to each individual committee. So I wouldn't want a philosophy to narrow down the openness, but right. Nevertheless, prioritizing something may very well do that.
And I don't have a definitive answer yet.
I don't either. So,
so there you go.
Oh, all right, thank you.
So that's a real good thing about a term ending. You guys worry about it. Okay, so we can move on to the
How about a 2-minute break?
Ah, I thought we were having it, but sure, we have 2 minutes. All right, run like hell.
All right, good night, everyone.
All right, take care, Brian. Thank you.
A bank account, they didn't need R5, but I specifically said that in the past, we have affiliated with certain groups for purposes of entertaining whatever they do for the benefit of the township, regardless of what their resources are.
Right.
So it was an interesting discussion, but I was outnumbered about 7-1.
I'm sorry, I should have been there.
Well, I'm just telling you how it went down, but that's what it was all about. And I think their new programming sounds very innovative and could really be very beneficial to that community going forward.
The numbers of participants in their new program are multiples of what the old program was, and it's just knocking the socks off of them.
Well, the old program, they said they had 176,000, but the old program, they used to rely on YouTube and other third-party platforms to convey their message. And what they realized was they needed to consolidate it into their own platform where they controlled their message 100% and initiated new programs, which they said they're rolling out new programs on a quarterly basis, a monthly basis. Whenever they have something new, they put it out there. So again, though, the committee was being fiscally responsible to its taxpayers and felt it wasn't appropriate.
To what cost, though?
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
So
at some point, to what cost?
Right. So that was what happened, but I read the report, 961 unduplicated new Trier participants last year. That blows away many of our other committees.
Almost all of them.
Yes, so there you have it.
Hello,
Hello,
how are you doing?
good.
Did you get your card?
Who is speaking, please?
The red card, the red envelope
I'm sorry, who's speaking?
with your check in it? Birthday card?
Hello,
Who's on the line with us, please?
Oh,
who has a red card? All righty then.
Okay, 21st century.
Well, why don't we just start talking about something else and they'll be so enthralled that. All right. We'll liven things up here with the enthralling supervisor's report.
We lost some of our players.
Oh, but you're right. Anyone who didn't have agency business kind of stuff to do is gone.
Elliot's gone.
He should be back.
All right. Does he have the red card?
Yeah, right. He's out looking for that. Well, the supervisor's report is that we're still in, the lights are working, all that. So we'll just move on to the next item. And
You're
Jerome,
on.
do you, oh,
So I'm the next item, and I
yeah.
I have 3 items for the board. So one is, I just want to follow up on what was talked about earlier. This is just one example of a FOIA.
Good Lord.
And just as Nicole, are you? Sorry, but the best thing is usually the FOIA request. Diane does everything. Diane does so many things all the time. But usually it's a simple thing, but not simple, but it just requires pulling together numbers. But boy, is this one, I hope not the indication of the future, but it's something we have to do. And it's, I just thought I'd share that with you and just express you how appreciative I am with Brian, because there is no way like to pull together all that information. And the requester is serious about it. She wants everything.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
we have an experience with this person.
So let's hope it's not a trend. So that was the first thing. It just a lot of respect for Brian for many things, but including that help. Okay, the second thing is I want to congratulate members of the New Trier Citizens League Party. And I have all the old names that they used to use, but the New Trier Citizens League Party as the sole competitors in the New Trier Township Consolidated. Congratulations to all of you. It's going to be, what a blessing for the township. Not that competitive elections are exciting. It really helped everyone 4 years ago, but considering we can get everybody started, the new people, and then move on to Alan and I retiring, it's just going to be terrific. We did not have to convene an electoral board. Stefan, isn't that good? Alan, it would have been the three of us. That's the requirement, the longest serving trustee, supervisor, and the clerk. So we don't have that. And also, one terrific news, we did not even get a challenge. So if you remember last time, I had to, we had people to inspect all the documents. This time, no, they did not. And so last night, kind of something that intrigued, I had a chance to certify the ballot, but there's one looming question. So including those of you who were part of that issue, if Elliot's back, Elliot, oh yeah, Elliot, you'll be happy to know I typed that in last night, all set the advisory referenda question, and everybody's name and everything on the ballot. There's only one issue before I can certify the draft, and that is they allow nicknames. So I did not realize, I just didn't remember, nobody on our slate has used a nickname, but there's a checkbox to add nickname. So I wanted to make sure that Trustee Thomas had the opportunity. Would you like Big Dog enter on the ballot? John, I've been laughing about you all day.
That's what my great-grandchildren call me.
You want me to do it, John? Just John Big Dog. Because it's actually an option there for a lot of people that just only go by their nickname. Are you sure, Trustee Thomas?
I'm quite sure that my great-grandchildren will never be looking at that ballot. Therefore, Big Dog does not need to appear.
We'll go in the newspapers. So congrats again. I'm just really delighted. And it's just a great thing for all of us.
Jerome,
in the final, yes.
How did the referendum question evolve? I'm curious as to how it went from the annual town meeting to a discussion to submitting it to you putting on the ballot. I'm just curious.
So I can answer that. Stefan, they did it in a whole, it's a group that's across the board. I mean, they're in all sorts of other townships, and they thought, isn't it a great avenue to put it on the ballot for the township? But they actually wanted it on the November election, but because we were too late with the April one, we had to shift it over then to the township election.
So that referendum is on other township ballots as well?
Yeah, I know of for fact it's on Niles and Northfield.
Okay.
A whole bunch of others. I'm
Fair
just
enough.
telling you, Stefan and Elliot and everybody who was concerned that yes, it did go on there. That it's just that we've never had it. Just like having a virtual ATM, we had never had a group, at least in 12 years, and I'm sure Alan and Stefan, you remember way back.
Nobody like.
So they just hadn't used it. I mean, for villages, yes, but not for the township. But the cool thing is that will be on the ballot for voters. So that's with the election. And the final thing, and it's beyond, what is it? Beyond any channel, so everything's set. And then the final thing is annual town meeting. I had a fantastic meeting with Jack McCall yesterday, and we were brainstorming, thinking about how to move ahead. I don't want to get caught like last year. You know that technically we didn't even have to have an annual town meeting because it's subject to lifting of the governor's emergency. So we could have not had one. I'm glad we did, but I don't want to do it that way again. So it was fine, but I want to do a much better.
The word chaos enters your mind?
Yes. Alan, as you know, that is so.
That wasn't you, it was all of us. It was.
As clerk, so Nicole, this is a throw, and we've had some really great ones over the years. And I want to close out with a very nice one. So one of the ideas that some other townships, I just talked to the clerk at Hanover Township, they do this. We'd have a hybrid where it would be the board and award winners, socially distanced space, if you can, at the township hall. So we would move everything out, really make it safe environment, and we would do a Zoom from there. And that's just a possibility. We would actually do it on the date. We wouldn't publicize it as invitation to come to the in-person part, rather to join us on Zoom. And we'd have everything set up way in advance so that nobody would be excluded from attending. We'd have it all squared away so that people would know about it, would be ready to roll. But to plan it as an in-person meeting with the likelihood that it would be delayed, and I would rather just move forward on this. But again, this is just an idea. And
Jerome and Jack, when would this next town meeting occur?
April 14th.
Next April.
14.
After 6 o'clock.
But wouldn't the COVID thing be gone by then if the vaccinations work?
Who knows? Not if people keep coming from England. I don't know.
John, if it, hopefully you're right and it's gone, but then that will just make it more relaxed for the in-person people. And then it wouldn't be as stressful as it.
And we just don't know if it's going to be here or not. We just don't know.
So instead of planning a big shebang going outside of the township, we have over the last, how many times? We've done it 3 times in the township hall. And I know it's not the same glamour as going out in the community, but I think for this year, we could plan a very good one without having to get any commitments. You remember we had the Take-Off Center, we had everything lined up last year. Jack had a great, remember the invitation looked so good, the speaker, everything was set to roll. And then we had to pull the plug, and then rescheduling it, we couldn't really do publicity. I'd rather plan for it now, set on the invitation, and just do it in a unique way.
But you guys are in charge, so you do however you want.
But it's still out of respect for you and the idea of your participation.
That's your job, so I don't want you to serve that.
Agreeable to all of you. And John, I wish it were the way it had been for all those years, but maybe if we kind of bring back with a really well-organized thing, then we'll be doing a good service for the township.
Thank you, Jerome.
Okay.
Rom, would you mind sending me the FOIA request? Because I did find my 2018 folder.
Great. Thank you, Gail. That's great. So now you're the last piece of the puzzle. Would you like to come with me to bring it up to her?
I might have to redact a few things first, so.
You think?
My annotations.
I will be glad to share a phone call with you guys before you go. I had several meetings with her on another issue surrounding the township. And I think it might be useful if I chat with you guys before you actually go up. There's some insight that might be useful, and you know, it's an unusual situation.
We've had,
although Gail, you'll do well. She's a litigator, and you guys can just have a wonderful time.
We've had
I'm very intent on being first chair. I learned that phrase from her. Maybe it means more to you than it did to me.
Alan, the one fear is that we have to, unless it's unduly burdensome, or we could charge them, but all that, but it's not.
I just give her the paper. I don't want to get involved in charging her.
If you hope she never does it again.
And then, as far as I'm concerned, we're done. We gave her what we're supposed to give her, and then let her worry about it.
That's what I was going to suggest.
That's my goal. Here's the paper. Here's the note you wanted. Here's all the public information. Enjoy it.
Because if she decided to do this again, that would be an issue, because, and she could.
She can have any public document there is. That's my feeling. You want it, you got it.
That's the end of my report. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So, Jan, you have a turn. You got to push your thing. You're unmute.
Push your space bar, you're muted.
Jan, you're still muted.
Jan, wake up, you're muted.
Here I am, that's fine.
Hey.
My little microphone wasn't there, so I didn't know I was still muted.
Okay.
I want to apologize just for missing the meeting in December. I had a complete and very long lasting senior moment. And I was already on December 15th. So I was a little behind schedule, but so that's why I wasn't there.
Just assess us, that's all.
Yeah. And the third quarter and fourth quarter reports, I hope will both be ready for the February meeting. It's just been a delay in getting all the information in from all the various sources that we put into the quarterly reports. And I thought rather than send out incomplete quarterly reports and then have to say, we've got a part B going here it is, I would just wait until we had all of it and I would give it all to you all at once.
Okay.
Seemed to me to make better sense, even though it's a little slow.
Okay.
In general, for the year of 2020, I think our activity levels are going to be down, sort of in line with everything being down because of the pandemic. People, maybe people did not appeal. Maybe a lot of people to the Board of Review. Maybe the COVID reduction gave a lot of people enough of a downward bounce that they were happy with that and didn't choose to appeal. But we had fewer appeals than I would have expected. It isn't a huge amount, but and I noticed also there was a little typo in my report, so I will correct that and send it out. Our appeals to the Board of Review ended on December 1st. We haven't had the hearings yet. I said December 4th in our report. The hearings haven't been held yet. And just as an FYI, because I don't know whether neighbors and so forth ask you trustees questions about what's going on in the assessor's office sometimes, or whether you would just like to have the information anyway for yourselves in case someone does. Since we haven't had our hearings yet, we are way behind schedule in terms of when the Board of Review is going to be finished with us and be sending out decisions. It may well be that they will be sending out their decisions not that long before we open in the assessor's office in 2021. And it very well may not be until after the tax bills have gone out for the first half or the first tax bill for 2020. This sort of thing throws people immensely because they say, but I don't even know what my assessment is yet. It's fine, we can deal with it all. But the scheduling is going to be way off what people were used to. We were always finished before the end of a calendar year with the Board of Review. So they had their information well ahead of the next calendar year. And now it's going to be overlapping and probably very confusing for a lot of people. I have a feeling if I hadn't had to take a lot of courses learning about what the scheduling is all like, I would be one of them. So this is most understandable in my opinion. Couple of things that are in general not specific to the office. Dan Patlack lost his bid for the re-election in November. And the new, I have not yet talked to the new Board of Review Commissioner, Tammy Wendt. I hope to do so this week. I got a voicemail from her chief of staff. So I don't have anything to report about her except that she's there. And those of you who who may think the name Tammy Wendt is familiar, but can't think why, it's because she was the defense attorney for Jason Van Dyke in the Laquan McDonald shooting. And I mentioned that not with any prejudice involved, but just to put her into focus for you. The one thing of note, which is it's coming, the official announcement just isn't out there yet. It will come later this month. Assessor Kagi is as of 2020 only, going into 2021. Nobody will have to file any paperwork to get an exemption that they already have. This means not only the homeowners and seniors for people who have fallen off the grid, but they know they're there. This means that people who got the senior freeze will still get the senior freeze. People who had a veterans disability exemption will still get the veterans disability exemption, whatever it was they had the previous year. and those two, the freeze and the veterans disability, those are ones that are normally annual because they can change. So, and it's possible, I suspect they're tweaking how that's going to work, because if somebody's income, for instance, in 2020 does not make them eligible for the freeze anymore, there's going to have to be a way to find that out so that they aren't given something they're not entitled to. And obviously, one overall exception, sorry, is that people who turned 65 in 2020 are still going to have to file the paperwork to say that they are now eligible for that exemption, because they're not in the system as being eligible for that assessment or for that exemption, sorry. Aside from that, that's about all we know about what he's up to now. He just put out a large report last week about how something that he had done, for the first time ever, as though it is some kind of new announcement, which has me totally confused because he did it 2 years ago. So I haven't finished reading why he thinks this is new.
Really new this time.
Right. So I thought I'll go through why he thinks it is important to re-mention this fact that this is a news item now. It was a news item then, and I'll figure that one out. But that's where he is anyway. He remains very busy, but the offices are still closed. It is still really hard to get in touch with people. It's not their fault. It's just, I think they are also caught because there's no way that they have to easily communicate with one another between the different divisions. It's so much easier if you can just pick up the phone and call so-and-so and say, I've got something here, I want to finish it right now. That they're not available. So eventually we will all get back to normal, and I'm sure we will all look forward to that day. And welcome to 2021, everybody. So that's my report.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you very much. Okay. So now we have
Financial.
Diane.
Hello there. I got the financial report here. We have 2 documents, and it's for the year-to-date period for November 30th of this year. I'm going to make this brief. This is the same format that we've had in the past. What I'll do is I'll just kind of give an overview of each report and highlight things that I've noticed that need to be addressed as we move into the end of the fiscal year, which is the end of February next month. The 2-page report, and I'm assuming everybody has that available to them. Is that correct? Does anyone not have that? Yes?
Sure.
Okay. The 2-page report represents the 9 months overview, which is a 75% of our fiscal year. And it notes on the first page the town fund balances, and on the second page, the general assistance. The overall position that we are in is for the town fund. Our amounts at the end of this period is $1,394,700. The general assistance is at 1.113, $267,000. Noting that the different areas of activity include our levy receipts, personal property, our interest. The passport fees are no longer rising at this point in time. Beginning of the pandemic, I believe it was April or May, is when the passport fees ended, at least temporarily. The IMET recovery, we haven't received anything, and the other income, which is an annual receipt, is that from the Torma dividend. Noting the different balances that we have in all of the accounts, and just to make a note that the percentages, as they are everywhere, the percentages have not really changed in the past several months, and at this point in time, I don't anticipate that that's going to happen probably for a while. Page 2 includes the general assistance, noting the same items, the levy receipts and the interest income. Again, the checking and money markets dollars are displayed there, but they also are at lower percentages that we've had in the past. Any questions on this report? Okay, we'll move on, and I'll make this brief given the evening time, but certainly just want to highlight things. The 4-page report is a detailed report of the FY 2021 budget that was put in place and approved in September on the 29th. This represents, just as I noted before, this represents 9 months, which is 75%. The second column is our actual year-to-date dollars. Noting on the revenue side that have received 83% of the property tax. And as in the past, the last 3 months is usually indicative of if we're going to receive those dollars that we have indeed levied. Historically, we do receive the dollars. The timing of the receipt oftentimes is out of sync with our budget period. For instance, if we didn't receive something in February, we received them in March, but those dollars are allocated and assigned to the fiscal year when we have the annual audit. Nothing of any consequence in that, any of the other revenues. Personal property is running at the same, a little bit lower than it did last year. The income, as you can see, is considerably lower. On that first page, we see the 67% for all of the programs. That simply represents 2 of the 3 payments that are made. The final payment for the 3, for the agencies will come at the end of February. And we divide that into 4-month increments. Page 2, just want to highlight the project funds, which includes our community support grants. We're at a 2% for that whole amount, and that's simply because in February is when those, and that will be on the next board meeting agenda, those dollars are then approved and finally presented to the board. We have 290,000 allocated for that. It's a little bit higher than we had last year, but we have had over the years a growing amount of applicants, which is a good thing that we're able to respond to these needs. Moving down to just in the area of the different contractual services, I just wanted to highlight 2 things. The printing and the publishing, we're pretty much on target. Jack has had the next courier go out that will then include those dollars in the month of December, which will increase the postage, but we are monitoring that. I believe that we were in with the correct range with that and the postage. The IT support, this includes, there's a journal entry that did not make that into the November report. It was processed in December. You'll see that with the next report for December. The IT support is really at a 53% level, and that you'll see that change. And the office equipment and contracts is not at 24%, it's at 59%. And that's simply a journal entry that has been made to properly allocate the dollars for our, as everyone knows, we've got new computers. We have a new laptop that Brian has been using routinely, and as well as the warranties to protect all of these new pieces of equipment. Moving on to the 3rd page, we're looking at, that includes the general assistance, and I'm sorry, it includes the staff salaries and our Social Security and the IMRF and the employee health insurance. The percentages are sitting quite high, and it could be beg the question, why is this so high? We have an annual transfer that comes routinely once a year. We sometimes break it up, we do it once a year, transferring those dollars allocated from the general assistance account back into support our activities in the town fund. Thus, you will not see the dollars for those same categories in the general assistance until that entry is made. Total overall status of the township is that there were 1.836838 activity dollars, which represents really 57% of our current budget. But do note that we do have routine charges, for instance, the community support grants, as well as the last payment for our agencies that takes place in February, which will then correct this balance. So we're not looking at 57%. Moving on to the last page, hopefully quickly enough here. Just noting that the property taxes for the general assistance is sitting pretty much in the same range as the town fund, just a little bit higher. Emergency assistance is moving on a tremendous level. Jean, we had talked about this extensively during the budgeting period and talk about it routinely. Really those dollars, she's using these, and there's more and more as the days and the months go on. The home relief dollars is really sitting at 41%. She doesn't anticipate that to really increase too much before the end of the fiscal year, although we do have those funds set aside should that be a problem. As I noticed on the other report, the administration, there's no dollars there for the salary, Social Security, et cetera, but those will show up as when that journal entry is done, then that will show that those dollars have been used. Overall, we're looking at if for some reason at the end of November, the township would be shut down or the township was no longer in existence, we would be sitting at a position where we have the $545,000 sitting as a positive balance. However, the dollars in those commitments that we have would have to be handled at that point. So that is it. I hope that wasn't too long. Any questions from anyone?
I have two questions, Diane. First of all, it doesn't appear that the COVID pandemic really impacted our budget significantly in any way. And the follow-up question to that is, do you foresee having to shift any dollars between line items to cover for other line items?
Which is what we routinely do next month. At this juncture, I do not. My first response would have been certainly for the contract hire and for the IT support, but that journal entry is going to reverse or basically reallocate the dollars to the appropriate place for our equipment. December just got the rest of the December reports. At that point, then we'll be 2 months away from the end of the year. But at this juncture, to answer your question, I don't see that, but I don't want to.
That's fine. I was just curious. I think the most interesting thing is that we're an organization which was not impacted
correct
financially by COVID. That seems to be apparent.
Correct. And that's
Okay.
because, okay.
How you feeling?
I'm moving along.
All right. Get
That's
better.
a good way to put it.
Diane, I've got a quick question for you. When Brian got his new computer, was there anything that came along with the computer that gave him a few hours of training, or was he given the computer and smiled and plugged it in and prayed?
It's an interesting way to ask the question. Brian did have experience with his own personal computer at home and his telephone. However, as we all know, that is totally different than different equipment that we might have. We do have the IT support people. They were there to help him, to show him how to do that and walk him through that. And he's now become an expert, in my opinion, with that.
Well, compared to the rest of us, he already.
Yes, it's a very good thing that we do have that.
Quick question, Diane. Excellent report. On the second page, under those contractual services, I might have missed it. What's the difference between IT support and contract hire?
The contract hire is for contract people. I guess the best example I have is in Jerome's office. His support person is a contract hire. It's an hourly paid person for that, for those positions. We've had in the past people come on site to help Jean with a part-time person, if you will, but it's an hourly person is the best way to describe that. The IT support is the company, the HTML Global, which is the company that is supporting all of our IT and have generated the new system and all of our IT expenses. And that's basically a company. It's a vendor.
Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, best bargain in township government.
Pardon me?
The best bargain, the best.
Yeah.
Nicole, you need a deputy clerk.
Jerome, do you have any
Yes.
guidance as to when we may begin meeting in person again, or no information?
No, none of the, no.
Okay. So we'll just keep treading water.
Diane,
Diane, is there any more help that we can give you, or are you getting everything you need from us?
Are you speaking to me or to Jerome?
Yes, to Diane, to you.
Are you talking about with what I'm working on here?
In terms of your technology that you've got set up at home and the liaison stuff that we have going back and forth from the office, is there anything else that we can be doing to make your job any easier?
I appreciate that. No, based on the technology, based on the availability of all my files and that, I basically have an office with everything I need and been able to have that. My recommendation would be in you're asking on behalf of the board, I'm assuming, correct, is that to make sure that the staff understands and that the board is supportive and understanding. And I feel that this has been talked about before, of what their work is being done and appreciated, because we do have a very, very small staff.
We do, and they
have a very
miss
competent
with you.
staff.
Like, the uncertainty of not knowing, how your recovery is progressing, it's just a little stressful for a couple of them. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I hear you, but stressful is something that is really my experience with.
Well, we're all rooting for you.
Contact and go ahead.
Keep healing up and keep getting better.
Doing the very best I can. Thank you.
Yay.
Diane, thanks again. I notice that we have a pretty good amount of money left in office equipment. I was wondering if there's anything we can be doing proactively to prepare for reopening at this point.
Oh, Gail, thank you so Alan, to your question about some townships actually have, but the thing is they've all invested in thank you, Gail. They've actually had to spend the money to have the divider. I think it's Niles Township. I know for sure Hanover Township. So there are many other school boards, but they've had to buy all the different safety equipment. So Gail, if we had the desire to do that, we could meet in person. It's not like we're restricted, and we could still have the Zoom as well. That's what Niles does, a mixture thing. So does Hanover. So we can, if you'd wish, to have our next board meeting or the one after that in person. I was only referring with the annual town meeting as a bigger scale thing. That's what I would.
Right, but my feeling, if it isn't broke, let's not mess with it.
Well, I'm more concerned for constituent services. Just making sure we have, plexiglass, because I think there will be a number of months where we'll be operating relatively, with not the whole population vaccinated. So that's, if we have it and we can make our staff safer, let's consider that.
And if the office equipment, Gail, is really more specific to equipment, what I call hard equipment, like the computers and the copier and that kind of thing. I think if we're talking about that, it would be office supplies, to the point of what Jerome is saying, is putting up these shields and that in the different townships. And I've been in contact with that. We all interact. And once again, just to make the note that the configuration of our building does provide certain issues. You could put up this plastic shield, you could do the different thing, but when just looking just generally at the sizes of the office and the way in which people would be interacting, the staff has expressed concern for that concern, and only certainly not just be in the offices, but even in our area, in the lobby and down the halls. And so that there is a certain amount of less space, I guess, or more confinement that we would have to certainly look at. The glass things that are in all of the banking institutions and all that is all well, but we do have money, and the money would, I think, would come not from that, but would from supplies or anything of that kind of sort.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise,
we could set a meeting date, which looks like it might be February 9th.
I'd like to suggest that we make it later. Reason being,
I'll make it whenever you want.
Yeah, well, the end of the month, just to even to comment on Stefan inquiry about where line items and that kind of thing. The
Diane,
later we,
pick a date.
pardon me?
Pick a date.
Oh, well,
There's
all
power
right.
for you.
Is that, I don't know, but we're looking, what's the I'm just looking at the, let me see. We're looking at the 22nd. Is that the last Tuesday in the month?
That's a Monday. Oh, are you
is
looking at January or February?
I'm looking at February.
February.
Probably the 23rd is the
is
last
Monday.
Tuesday in the month.
16th is Mardi Gras. So maybe.
Oh,
Whoa.
boy. Jerome, are you going? There is no Mardi Gras.
My mind, the 23rd, is that?
23rd is a Tuesday. I was
It
looking
is.
at,
So we'll do it the 23rd.
is that doable for everybody? That gives us the most information to make decisions on.
And then, yeah, the biggest leeway.
Correct.
Well, thank you all very much. It was a good meeting. We got through an awful lot of information.
Point of order, Alan.
No.
I think you're
go on.
looking at an earlier version of the agenda. But I did have new business on the agenda.
What's on the agenda?
We have.
There's several things.
Oh, I don't have that. I'm sorry.
No, Gail made a point of order because there's a new business.
But bring it
something's-
up.
Well,
there's-
hold on a second.
There's several things
I-
before that.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, there's the acknowledgement of staff board reports, but there's a trustee liaison reports. And then there's continuing business, which it doesn't seem to be, and then there's Gail's official recognition of Juneteenth. So I think I would like to just suggest Juneteenth is a very interesting subject. And we probably ought to hold that off until the next meeting and put it way up the agenda so we get to it.
I would suspect that there would be some conversation about it, if nothing else. Or there should be. So that everyone's on board with what we do or don't do.
Is there a motion on the floor?
I don't know. Mr. Thomas, as the parliamentary expert. Okay. John?
John, you're on mute.
Okay, now I'll make a motion. I make a motion that the new business agenda item 13, that is the official recognition Juneteenth, brought to the board by Trustee Eisenberg, be held off until next month, but we put 5th or 6th on the agenda so we get to it rather than having it buried at
Early
the
on in
end.
the meeting, and there's time to thoroughly discuss. Okay. So we will make that happen.
Okay.
I think you need a second.
Second,
I'm looking for one.
just to keep it.
Is there a second? Oh, we're going to wait here a long time. Okay, guys.
I'm not going to wait here a long time, I'll tell you that.
Could we have a second to that motion? Or it's going to die, so.
Okay, so the motion died.
Okay, for want of a second.
I
Well,
would like
actually,
to make a
if
counter
you read
motion
Robert's
that
Rules of Orders, we don't need a second in a board this size.
I'm wondering if I can make a counter motion that we just approve it as written.
No, absolutely not.
No.
Can't do that?
No,
We can, but I'll resign from the board if you try that. trick.
Substantial opposition for that.
Can anyone give me a little history as to how well this is being accepted by other municipal entities? Because I thought this was a widespread movement.
Well, Cook County just approved it in December, paid vacations for their, and recognition. The state of Illinois, I think it was last June or July, made it a state holiday.
I
And
guess
there's-
what would be our reluctance to follow suit on something as well received?
I'd like to discuss it, Elliot, at length. I've got some real complaints about the problem.
Yeah, one of our members has significant issues.
Understood.
Also, we don't celebrate Kosciuszko Day and we don't, other state holidays. So I have no problem with discussing the issue. And then we come to something that we could all live with.
Well, given John's concern about it, I would second his motion then that we table it till the next time.
Okay, we now have a second.
Thank you.
Got one.
Thank you, Alex.
Okay.
Further discussion?
All in, oh no, I got to call a roll call.
Supervisor Goldberg,
Yes.
Trustee Mosher,
Yes.
Trustee Eisenberg,
No.
Trustee Robbins,
Yes.
Trustee Thomas.
Yes.
So it approves. Okay.
Another
So
point,
somewhere early in the agenda before 5th.
another point of order.
Go for it.
We need to at least acknowledge the other items on the agenda to indicate that we have dealt with this agenda. We can't just leave them off and not addressed.
Okay.
So the first one would be liaison reports. I don't know if there are any, but we need to go through the rest of the agenda.
Okay.
Yes. I thought the liaison reports were on the original agenda and then removed for the revised agenda. I could be wrong.
And I don't have a revised.
Elliot, I have the revised agenda. It's on here. It's
Okay,
on the
you go
revised.
through the list and stuff, and I don't have a
Definitely.
revised agenda.
There was
Yeah,
a
Jerome.
revision, so maybe that's part of the confusion.
I
I'm
did
looking
get
at a
the-
revised agenda.
I thought Larisha was very good. I did get the revised agenda.
And
I've
I
got-
think so. I'm asking one of you guys just to go through the list.
I've got 2 revised agendas.
Well, you could pick one.
The one I'm looking at is Tuesday, January the 12th, and it no longer has the liaison reports.
Okay, fine. So, John, I'm relying on you. I have been assured that you know parliamentary stuff up and down. And you're muted again, I think.
Who's responsible for sending out the agendas? Is it,
I believe Larisha did at Diane's direction.
yeah. Well, the most recent one I have includes all sorts of things, and then one doesn't. But there's a,
And I didn't get one, so.
That is correct. There had been 2 agendas that went out, on one on Thursday, one on Friday. Subsequent to that, I responded to Larisha over the weekend, asking her to return several items that had been on the first agenda, removed on the second agenda that came out on Friday. After that, in the one I'm looking at, someone here mentioned that they don't have the trustee liaison reports. The final one, which it has, after my financial report, it has the trustee liaison reports. If there's any kind of comments or anything, obviously they've been made at the, we're going back to our standard document, the acknowledgement of staff reports, continuing business, new business, Gail's official recognition of the Juneteenth, the February board meeting date, which we've done, and then the motion to adjourn. Pardon me, I missed the approval of claims by
Right,
John
you did.
Thomas, pardon me. But that is the one. I'm just looking, I don't want to lose this connection. I was looking on my computer to see if I can forward that, but it does include that too, which is the issue at hand.
I have
that must be
posted that in the chat twice.
Pardon?
The agenda's in the chat.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that.
And what?
And that does include that.
So just
So,
start, are there any liaison reports?
Typically, I would say not on the night that we get the committee presentations for funding.
you're right, I think.
I have no additional report other than what was already given.
Same.
Nor do I.
Nor
that works.
do I. I've got
Okay. Then we do acknowledgement of staff reports.
So
That's
acknowledge.
next.
Duly noted.
But we've had a vote on that. At least last month you voted on it.
So
We've gotten rid of that.
we're good then.
So
We
that
can
was
go
our
home.
last.
All right.
Yeah, we got rid of it as a matter of voting on it, or it's not on this agenda.
No. We
It's
we
on
don't
the
need, we're
agenda.
not, we don't vote on acknowledgements.
Yes,
Nothing for us to do.
Gail's right. Gail
Yeah.
remembers right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Last time. So
Okay, so we'll deal with
Continuing-
all this stuff next time. Or
Continuing
whatever
business.
we're gonna do. The only thing for sure we're doing is Juneteenth next time.
some claims, are we gonna?
Yeah, we have to do claims.
We have to do that.
Well, I've got it all written out so I can do it real fast.
Go.
Please.
Okay, number one, I move we approve payroll checks for the period December 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020, numbered 7726 through 7742, for a total disbursement of $24,588.98.
Second.
Second, okay. Mr. Clerk,
There further discussion?
I don't know.
I don't mean to-
Yeah, I know. I was being a smart ass. All right.
Supervisor Goldberg,
Yes.
Trustee Mosier,
Yes.
Trustee Eisenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Robbins,
Yes.
Trustee Thomas.
Yes.
Payroll checks are approved.
Okay, next is I move we approve town fund checks for the period December 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020, numbered 25615 through 25667, for a total disbursement of $24,218.22.
Second?
I'll second.
Whose picture is that?
It looks familiar, but it's
Does
not.
anybody see? it?
Well,
Jerome,
it's not mine.
it's cute.
Further discussion?
Now, if Bauer would open his mouth, I'd know if that's him. Never mind.
Sorry, John.
With a kid hanging out of it.
Supervisor Goldberg,
Yes.
Trustee Mosier,
Yes.
Trustee Eisenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Robbins,
Yes.
Trustee Thomas.
Yes.
Town fund is approved.
And can we just have a quick report onto what's been going on with the approval of
Gail,
You
we
just
lost
cut
you.
out.
What, say
Gail.
that again. What'd she say?
I don't know.
I couldn't hear.
You broke up, Gail.
Gail, we lost you.
Hello?
Gail.
She's frozen.
Oh, good.
Can she come back on that or how does that work?
She's gonna have
Alan-
to
or,
sign out and
Jack?
sign back on.
Not me. Not
Jack, no, Jack,
Scotty, beam her up.
Jack's on,
Oh, he's frozen too.
yeah.
No, she has to log back in or something. She's frozen.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Then she doesn't know that she's frozen.
Gail, I got you on speakerphone right now. Oh, that's her voicemail.
Okay.
I thought I could get her on speaker.
Well,
I'll
there
try-
you go.
She just signed out. She'll come
Okay.
back.
Okay.
She will.
And then we need an approval on this, right, Jerome?
Aye.
My computer completely shut down.
We can all hear you. I got you on
We can
speaker.
hear.
Everybody hear Gail?
Yeah.
Yep.
Go ahead, Gail.
Sorry. Oh, I was just asking if we could have just a little overview about what happened, what's been going on with approval of claims in the past months.
What?
I couldn't hear. What did she?
She asked what's been going on with approval of claims the past month, if we could have a little overview.
On the, what is over the past month? Are you talking, is she referring to the pandemic? This had not been included actually.
We don't
during
have that. We could do that at the next meeting. We're not
Or
prepared.
is she asking, I can't quite understand, Elliot, about what's on these.
Gail,
I
say
think-
that again, please.
I think what Gail's asking is what have we done about approval of claims for months past?
They were not on the agenda. They are all documented and accounted for. I would recommend at the next meeting that we,
We could bring it up. We're not.
yeah, but I can certainly distribute another copy of all that. And John, I would want to work with you directly also on that. And then
Okay.
we could do that for the
We'll
year
get to
end.
that
But
at the-
as a result of the pandemic and whenever that was, I think we started in April or
Yep.
May, April.
Gail, did you get that?
Yes, we're discussing next month. I appreciate it.
Yes, but it sounds
Oh,
like
no,
as
we're
an
not.
emergency
Yeah.
measure, they went ahead and they got things signed and out, and we'll discuss it next month.
Yeah,
Is
all the
that-
checks are out, but we'll,
All the checks are out, right. But this one needs to be approved, this particular, so that we can move forward.
So that we don't
Jerome?
go to jail.
I would just say, Diane, whatever I can do to attest. to
Dale,
it.
satisfactory?
Satisfactory at this point.
Very good. She understands, and we'll look forward to discussing it.
All right.
And
So
it will
now,
be distributed before that. Okay.
have we, Jerome, have we approved all the claims now?
Yes, we have.
We have, and then we can adjourn and go home.
Do the same thing, just as a motion and roll call vote. I'm sorry.
I move to adjourn.
Yeah. So is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Stefan,
I second Stefan's motion.
And Jerome,
oh my gosh.
Supervisor Goldberg,
I adjourn, we're gone.
Trustee Moger,
Yes.
Trustee Robbins,
Yes?
Thomas,
Yes.
Trustee Eisenberg.
Yeah.
Everybody stay healthy, stay safe. God bless you all.
Good night.
Adios, amigos,
Good night.